Hopefully this one is the one that we think is the fun one. We'll see if you agree, I guess, right? I am Wendy Luedtke. I'm the color specialist at ETC. This is Mike Wood. He is a consultant with ETC and also very knowledgeable on color. The two of us serve together on the IES Color Committee. And today we're gonna try and play some tricks on you to have some fun and hopefully enlighten you about the relativity of human color vision. And with that, I'm going to let you get started.
Okay. Am I on? Yes, I
Yes.
am. Thank you.
Oh, you're sideways. That's why.
Sideways. Good afternoon. Welcome. Where does this start? We're going to start with saying that color isn't real. You know, color is one of your senses that is completely perceived. There is no absolute relationship between light wavelength and the color that you see. This isn't like kilograms or meters or something where you can go and measure it. Everything we know about light and everything about color is all perceived through human eyes and the human brain and all the processing that goes on in there. And that's what this talk is all about. And that's what makes all the difference. Looking here, if I asked you immediately what you saw there, I think you'd say, Mike, I can see a red cylinder, I can see a blue cone, I can see a yellow block. You'd say that without thinking. But if you stop to think about it, you're not really seeing a blue cone, you're seeing dozens of shades of blue, dozens of shades of yellow and of red. But your brain is saying, I know about light, I know about shadow, that's a solid blue cone and a red cylinder. There's nothing else going on there. But what we're really seeing is all of that, and we're making sense of it as an object of a solid color. But our color vision is not absolute in any way, shape, or form. Our color vision is relative. We see color by reference to the colors around it, not as an absolute. And this isn't like sound where somebody can have perfect pitch. Somebody recognizes 440 hertz, they know that's A. You can't have that with color. There's no absolute reference as to what green is, or orange is, or red is. We see color by reference to what's around. Here's an example. You're seeing a couple of Rubik's cubes type of arrangements. One apparently lit with yellow light, and the other apparently lit with blue light. You know about that. You know how things change color when they're lit with colored light, and so you happily accept that those two are the same cubes with the same colored squares on them. But then I'm going to say, well, you're convinced that this is blue, and you're convinced that this is yellow. But actually, both those squares are precisely the same, and they're both gray. Even once you've seen that once, that's blue and that's yellow, you can't persuade yourself that they're exactly the same. It doesn't matter how many times I do this. You'll never be able to persuade yourself because your brain knows about colored light. You're not seeing colors. This actually isn't giving off any blue light. That isn't giving off any yellow light, but you cannot convince yourself that they're not. Not only works with colored light, shadow. We know about shadows. We know that when things are in shadow, they're darker than when they're in full light. Now you're going to work out here that I've got some trick similar to the last one. And this orange, apparently bright orange square here and this brown one are in reality both the same. If I join them up like that, it's still really hard to see, isn't it? I mean, it's orange and that's brown. Maybe if I cover that join, it's only if I do that you can see they're really exactly the same. And if I take that away again, your spatial knowledge that is a 3D object in space with a light shining on it and a shadow wins. So your brain is ignoring the signal from your eyes, which is identical for those two colors, and saying, no, it's not really. It's actually darker there because it's in full light than this one is in shadow. Anyway, this is an example from a researcher in Japan that I find particularly interesting because it's not only relative light that is relative color that's relative to the colors next to it, it's also what the subject is and what our expectations are of what the color is. In every case here, both eyes are the same color of the girl. And at the bottom here, I've duplicated the color arrangement around the eyes with something that isn't eyes, it's just squares. And in those cases, you can see that they're all gray. But up here, you can't. We're driven by, well, that's behind a red filter. Therefore, that can't be gray. It must be blue because it's behind a red filter. That one's behind a blue filter. That one's behind an aqua filter. And I think the little hair bauble helps too. Probably pushes the illusion a little bit. And if you don't believe me, those are all gray. I can draw lines like that, and that helps. It's still not you're still not completely convinced, I know. But if I do this, you are finally convinced that they're all the same. And again, like the other things we've looked at, it doesn't matter that you now know. You still can't convince yourself that it's the case because we know the world. Our brains know the world, and we know what we expect to see. So the wavelengths coming into our eyes are important, but they're only a small part of how we perceive color. Final example from the same researcher. In this case, both eyes, in every case, are the same color. So there are 2 red eyes, 2 orange eyes, and so on. Again, it's not till I do that you can completely convince yourself that that's the case. It's not only relative, it's not only our knowledge of shapes and shadows and light, it's not only our expectation of what people's faces are, it's also our memory. Once we know what color something is, it's hard to change your mind about it. And I'm attempting to show that here. So in this case, you're sitting staring at this and you're all being indoctrinated now that this is red. This is a red sign, no argument about it. Pull it out, it's red. Here I've covered it apparently with a bluish filter, such that these red areas are now actually gray. The light coming off that area is gray. Has no red in it at all. But you see that as red. This is the same as the thing I showed you earlier. But even if I zoom in now you know, I can zoom into that R, and this is still very clearly red. Even if I go right into the center of that R, this is all gray, you still see it as red. And it's not until I zoom in right into this middle area, is what I see here, this is this center area, that we can finally see it as gray. So this, I think, is a combination of things. We've got the relative color, we've got the expectation that when covered by a blue filter, things must actually be some other color, and we've also got color memory, that we know it's red, and we're not going to change our minds. Let's see some of this live.
So just in case you think that this is all trickery of Photoshop and is not real, I'm going to show you for real. So if we could go to black everywhere, please, and black out the projector. So what I need you guys to do now, if you have any digital devices, you have phones, you have iPads, you have laptops, whatever, get them completely out of the way. Put them in your pocket, under your butt, in your bag, wherever. And look only at these 2 panels. Just look at these 2 panels. I'm going to tell you some stories. I'm going to talk. I'm going to move around. Keep looking at these 2 panels, okay? So keep looking at those 2 panels. And what you see right now is a neutral white. This is what I would call open white, except it's with an LED. There's no gel. So, but those of you of an age to have used gel, open white is the term for neutral white, right? So here we are. We're looking at 2 panels that are very definitely the same color. This is open white. There's no color here. And now, very clearly, there's a pale pink on one side and white on the other, right? Pale pink stage right, open white stage left. Those of you who may be watching this on camera, none of this will work for you. I apologize. This is a good chance for a bathroom break. Because it's all relative, and I can't control the surround or their computer screen. So those of you in the room get the benefit of this one. So there's very clearly pale pink stage right, open white stage left, right? And there's no chance that that's going to change. That's always going to look like pink, and the other one is going to look like white. And that pink is pink. That's going to look like pink, no matter what. We know that's pink. Unless maybe I put a darker pink on stage left. And now I have a pale pink on stage right, and a darker pink on stage left. And that's definitely still light pink on stage right. Keep looking at it, don't look away. It's possible that I'm pulling a Tom Littrell on you. It is possible that there is a slow fade happening and I'm cheating and taking this pale pink back to the neutral white cue that we started with. I could be doing that. I'm not always a nice person. But maybe something's happening. And you'll only find out at the end. Keep looking at it. And maybe right now you think, okay, either she's tricked us or she's right and our eyes are readjusting because now there's white on stage right and there's a light pink on stage left, right? And that's what we see. But there's no chance that that pink that's currently on stage left is going to look anything other than pink. We can tell that. It's very clearly pink, and that's a pretty strong pink, so we know that nothing's going to change. Unless maybe I put it relative to a darker pink. And now it's a light pink, but it's still pink. Now I have a light pink and a darker pink, and I'm going to keep staring at them, please. And I'm going to start to tell you a story while you keep staring at those and you don't look at me. And let's see. I'm going to tell you a story. When I was a young lighting designer, I was doing a show, and this is back when fixtures didn't have the optics that they have today. They were much smushier, and there were halftone gobos that you could use to make clouds and moon and things like that. And you could really get some fantastic shadow and depth. And this is just a story I'm telling you to fill time while your eyes work on this image. So keep looking over there. So I had these halftone gobos filling a cyc, and I made these beautiful clouds. And behind it, I put this gorgeous salmon color. It was really beautiful. And you keep looking at that there, and you're wondering, is she pulling a Tom Littrell on me? And maybe you don't all know Tom Littrell, but he also works for ETC and does a color lecture where he plays with metamers and does some other lighting tricks as well. And now you're thinking, have I been slowly fading this light? Because now, on stage left, maybe I've taken it back to white. Have I? I don't know. Well, I know, but you don't know. And on stage right, is that pink still as dark as it was before? But we know that there's no chance that that pink is going to look anything other than pink.
It could never look anything other than pink.
It could never look anything other than pink over there, unless maybe, I'll tell the rest of the story now as we keep staring, please, at what is now a dark pink on stage left and a light pink on stage right. We're going to keep staring at this.
You must be cheating, Wendy.
Keep staring at this. And so I had this beautiful sky filled with halftone gobos and this salmon color behind it, and I was lamenting. I was sitting there lamenting because the show that I was lighting was this very dark drama, and the sky needed to be sort of, gloomy and maybe some dark blues and purples and sort of thunderous looking. And I was sitting there thinking, it's really a shame that I can't use this beautiful cue. And you're still staring at these banners, please. And Beverly Emmons, a very well-known lighting designer who's fantastic, sat down next to me, and she said, why not? And I thought, well, there's a pearl of wisdom. And I have carried that pearl of wisdom with me through my entire career, because why not? It's theater. We can create whatever reality we want, actually. And I could make that salmon apply to that thunderously dark play. And maybe here I've been playing with the light cues, but maybe your eyes have been doing it for me. And maybe now what looks like a very pale pink, if it doesn't look white, it at least looks like a very pale pink on stage right. Until maybe I do something like that. And I hope that you saw a flash of green on the right-hand side, on stage left. Did you see that? Thank you. And now this looks like a darker pink again, doesn't it? Yep. What happened there? I assure you that I was not doing any slow fades. All of that was your eyes adjusting to what they were seeing. And each of those colors was readjusting to be relative to the other one. So the pink looked dark when it was in comparison to white. As soon as the pink was in comparison to a darker pink, well, it didn't look so dark anymore, did it? It had something darker, and so your eye thought, well, that must be white then. And so I just kept playing tricks on you like that. And now that we've gone back to open white, in comparison to the pink, it's pushed green. It looks green. If I go back to both of them being open white and we sit here for a moment, that green shift will go away and it'll again just look neutral white. How do you use this in design? Why does this matter besides fun things to do after lunch? Which I think is legitimate, honestly. Lavender. Lavender is my personal least favorite color to use in the theater because I think you should just make a choice. Do you want warm? Do you want cool? And lavender is so easy to push either way. Nonetheless, I've used it many times because it's so easy to push warm or cool. But the truth is you can do that with any color. So here I have an amber and I have a lavender. And in this scenario, very clearly the amber is warm and the lavender is cool. If I'm trying to light a show and there's like an interior warm environment and it's moonlight outside, and these are the two colors I have to choose from, the amber is going to be my warm interior and the lavender is going to serve the moonlight purpose here, right? Assuming we're going for something vaguely realistic. On the other hand, if these are the two colors I have to choose from, I have not changed that lavender at all. Nothing changed in that light hue for the lavender side. But now it's in comparison to a very blue-green. And in this scenario, the lavender is my warm light. And this is what's going to have my performers feel warm and cozy. This is what's going to be romantic and lovely. And that's going to be the outside cool moonlight surround, right? So all of this, I hope, is opening you up to the, well, I personally, if you haven't guessed, think color's the most awesome tool. So let's look at lavender versus lavender. Even within lavenders, there are warm ones and cool ones. If you look at these two in a gel swatch book, you would be aware that there's a saturation difference between them. But you wouldn't notice that the hue is so very, very, very different until you put it on a light fixture. And here we almost have an amber and a blue. It's a very, very severe difference, warm and cool, between these two lavenders. I did this morning, and you know we had the blackout yesterday? I went to black and made a joke about power.
So RGB lights, when we first started getting RGB, and in the days of CMY, color mixing in moving lights, you often saw manufacturer claiming they could make 16,700,000 colors or something. And that figure just came from them multiplying 255 cubed for the RGB. But what we know, if we've used RGB lights, is you can't make 16 million colors. You can make maybe 100, and 50 of those are an unusable green. But what is a realistic number for the number of hues, the color points I'm talking about now, that we can see? I have here just 60. There's just 60 colors there, just going through the rainbow. With the black lines in, you can clearly see they're distinct. But if I take the black lines away, now here we're limited, obviously slightly artificial because we have a photoshopped image. It's coming from a computer. It's going through a projector. So we have all the color processing that's going on. But it gives us some idea at least. Even with just 60 colors, though I can see all the colors in the blues here, they merge together a little bit here, and they certainly merge together in these greens, and that's only 60. What about saturations? So now you have got fully saturated cyan, magenta, yellow, and then reducing saturation to the bottom, and there's just 32 steps. So I have 32 steps of saturation. And again, within the limitations of the projector and so on, you can see the steps in the magenta. You can kind of see the steps in the cyan. Yellow, they kind of all go away. If I do the same with RGB, it's a little bit clearer. I'm very good at seeing the steps in the blue and the red, not so good in the green. And that's only 32. So there's only perhaps, we talked about 60, 100 hues, and there's only 2,000 or 3,000 colors probably that we could individually distinguish in the kind of conditions we're talking about. We're not talking about in a laboratory and comparing two right next to each other. We're talking about actually recognized as colors on their own discretely. Here's those 60 going through a cycle. So now you can see steps, dunk, 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 as we go through the blues there. But those steps kind of disappear there. I can't really see them as we go through the green. You probably see something different than I, but something like that. And if I go up to 600, it's hard to see steps anywhere. So only 600 hues, and I can see some in the blue. I don't know whether you can see steps elsewhere, but most of it looks like a smooth fade. And it's just chopping between 600 colors. Interesting that there's a difference in the colors. This chart shows our acuity, our sensitivity to a small change in wavelength of color. So along the bottom here we have wavelength, blue to red, and up the side here we have the minimum change in wavelength that we need before we can see it as a changing color. So a big number here means that the color needs to change a lot before we can see it. And you can see that at very deep indigos, we're pretty insensitive to changing color. We have to change by 7 nanometers before we can see it. Same for deep reds. But I think more interesting are the points where it's low. So right here in the amber yellow, and right here in the aqua cyan, we only have to change 1 nanometer, and we see it as a changing color. Now, where do the gel manufacturers make most colors? You know, it's in the pale blues, all this range of pale blues, and it's in the straws and ambers and yellows. They by far make the most different gels in those colors. Now, I'm sure Roscoe and Lee and people didn't look at a chart like this and say, that's where we're going to make more gels. What they did was customers asked them for colors. We need a slightly greener blue. We need a slightly warmer yellow. And so over the years they built up, but it follows this. You know, the areas where we're more sensitive to color change, as you'd expect, that's where we need more different gels. So yellows and blues. Bit of a peak in the green, and the peaks in the red and blue. And this is perhaps why. If we look at our vision system, we know we have the 3 receptors, blue, green, red cones, or short, medium, long, more appropriately. Green and red are so close to each other that it's a bit of a misnomer to call them green and red. So if you look where these cross, so where the blue and the red cross, it's right where that most sensitive to color change is, and where red and green cross is right where that second point where we're sensitive to color in the pale yellows is. So that makes sense. It's where we're shifting from one of these receptors to another that we're most sensitive to color. So there is some reason behind this. This gets us into the whole topic of metamers, because each of these receptors is very simple. This blue cone receptor will respond to any signal in its range. Anything from violet to cyan, this receptor will see and will give a signal. The size of the signal doesn't necessarily relate to what color it is. It relates to what color it is and how bright it is. There's no way the eye can distinguish, or the brain can distinguish, whether a change in this signal is to do with a change in wavelength or a change in brightness. All you know is that there's some light in this area that has changed in brightness. That's all you know. And here's an example of that. You know, for a light of this color in the green receptor, we get exactly the same signal to the brain as we would of a light of that color. There's no way the brain can know whether we've received that signal or that signal. Combination with the other receptors, we make a guess and we work it out. But on its own, we only get one signal. And similarly here, if we have a signal that comes in at point A and it increases, we suddenly get a stronger signal. We don't know whether that's because the light at point A got brighter or whether the wavelength moved to point C. There's absolutely no way the brain can tell whether the light got brighter or whether it changed in wavelength. And so this is what allows us to have this strange business of metamers, where by mixing various wavelengths of light, you can mix different colors. It's why RGB works at all. Here's some examples with white light. All these examples give us white light. A white LED with a blue spike and a broad green area here stimulate the three senses in our eye, the blue, the green, and the red, in the right ratio that we think, oh, that's white light, because it stimulates in the same ratio as white light would do. And we have no knowledge that all these wavelengths are missing. So here's an RGB LED that looks the same white as the one I just showed you. Again, it just so happens that it stimulates the red, green, and blue emitters in the right ratio that it looks like white light. And again, we don't know that the cyan is missing. We don't know that the amber's missing. We don't have sensors for that. All we know is there's something in this area. Let's see this live.
All right, so some of you were in class with us yesterday, and we talked about the importance of spectral content and metamers, and here he is saying, metamers, there's all these things that we don't know. I would like to show you why you should care. So first I'm going to show you some whites. Thank you very much. So what I have over here now are some banners that I spun a little imperfectly, as you can see from my shutter cuts up top. And again, for they're videotaping this presentation this afternoon, and for the viewers at home, this will not work. So go get a drink. So these lights are the same chromaticity. They have the same CCT and DUV, and they are simply two different metamers of white. And you know, one of them is made with a nice full spectral content, and one of them is not. And I think you might care. I actually came up with these particular settings, this one and the next two, for a conversation at a Department of Energy solid-state lighting event. They do a research conference where they try and discuss, you know, where research should be going to make energy more efficient, to reduce energy usage, and you know, help us have a lighter burden on the planet. And this was an example that I gave for not ignoring aspects that are not directly, you know, you don't necessarily understand on paper why it's important to think about things besides power consumption. The trying to quantify the subjective aspects, the aesthetic aspects, and how to weigh those in the equation is hard. But, you know, RGB might look very efficient on paper, but when you light a human being with it, it's not so awesome. It's, I mean, I don't know, do I look good? You can be honest. It is, I feel like maybe this one is a more pleasant environment in a meaningful way. And you know, we've been down this road before with compact fluorescents, and it didn't go well. Who likes the compact fluorescents that are in their hotel room? Raise your hand. I would like the viewing audience at home to note that there was one hand raised, and I suspect it was ironically.
Maybe he manufactures compact
Maybe he manufactures compact fluorescents. It's possible. So, and here's another combination. Now, this combination actually uses red, lime, and indigo, so this side hasn't changed. This side is not changing at all. But this side has been changing, and this is red, lime, and indigo. And, you know, it's not great, but it's less terrible than the others, right? It's less terrible. I think it's less terrible. So there are places where you can go to sort of look for savings, if you will, and we can look at efficiency and all of these things, and blah, blah, blah. A lot of you are theater people, so let's stop talking about white because white is boring. So now I am going to pull a Tom Littrell on you. Oops. Oh, no, wait, close your eyes, close your eyes. Close your eyes. Close your eyes, don't look. I have to do a Vanna White first. I have to spin these to white. Don't look. Now we're going to look at some colored examples of metamers. Hashtag metamers matter. We could get that trending, right? Okay, so now you can open your eyes and look. So now you may see the chromaticity here is not exact. It's really close. So you may see a very slight color shift between the two panels, but it's slight, and they're pretty close to the same pale pink, right? But when I turn them around, I expect that you will notice that the change is perhaps more meaningful than you thought on the white. On the white, I would say, like, if you're just lighting a cyc or, something white. Either of those would have been a perfectly acceptable pale pink. But here, there's starting to be some meaningful differences on the banners. And if you can't see it, because it's going slowly, let me take the timing out of it for you. And perhaps if there's something green in your environment, maybe you care about which of these recipes is used. If you're the costume designer and somebody's in a green dress on stage, I think you care. And if you're the lighting designer, you care because the costume designer is friends with the director, and if you use the wrong one, the director is going to come walking up behind you at the tech table, and they're not going to be happy. So maybe you care how you got to that pink. Let's do it again with green, and this time I'm going to remember to spin the banners. So first we can look at it. And this one I like. This one I have a closer chromaticity match. There we go. And I'm getting my steps in. No, I don't do that. Okay, so here I have two greens, cyans, whichever way you want to, teal. Two different recipes. What do I mean by recipe? The spectral content is different. These are metamers. These are same chromaticity, but different way to get there. On a white cyc, move on with your life. Pick the color point. Don't bother to pay attention to how you got there because it doesn't matter. On a white surface, it doesn't matter. But most of what we do is light colored objects. We light environments with people in them. And it might be meaningful. And if you're still like, well, I don't really see a difference, that's not that drastic. Clearly you're not looking at the red at the top or the next layer down with the orange and pink and yellow, because that's a pretty gigantic difference, I think. And now I will ask Mike Wood to play Romeo for me. And I'll try to draw a connection here with why might this matter? How might you use this in your work? And this is directly lifted from the fabulous Tom Littrell. Here we are, Romeo. He's a forlorn teenager suffering in his world, his loveless world.
You could
right?
tell by the
And and then suddenly he sees Juliet. And things heat up. And ever so slightly, all I've done is add red at like 2%. And you just see the difference in his skin. That's it. And now all of you architects are falling asleep because it's after lunch and the room is dark. So let me go back to some whites for you. So those of you that were in the session yesterday, these cues are from that same session. So here we have a 3500K white on the black body. I'm going to call this our reference condition, right? And I have been talking about TM30, something called TM30. Some of you may have heard me mention it. It may be something that I advocate in favor of another metric that we should stop using as quickly as possible.
I've got a soapbox here, Wendy.
Yep, I'm going to step right up on this soapbox, and I'm going to say, this TM30 thing can help you prevent conditions where you might specify the wrong one of these two, which are also both 3,500 Kelvin on the black body. Again, for those folks at home, this will not work for you because I did not tune these to match the camera sensitivities. So you'll see all kinds of differences at home. So let's see, you've gone to the bathroom, you've gotten a drink, go get a sandwich. And what these two look like separately, here is undersaturation, and I suppose this is great if you want a pasty environment. If you have someone healthy and you would like to make them look unhealthy, then you might choose this one. You could do that. That's your prerogative. If you'd like to get paid for your job, maybe you want to choose this one, but actually, maybe you only want to choose this one if it's a theme park and you're also not really lighting people, because that's a little bit, it's better, but only so much, right? It's kind of awful in a different way. we'll go back to our reference source, and this is the one that I should have had Mike over there to do to stand in. But here's another 2 versions. Again, these are all the exact same CCT, which is the exact same correlated color temperature, which, just a reminder, that means it does not fall exactly on the black body curve, so we don't call it color temperature. But the DUV is the same, and you could have any of these conditions, and that old metric that we shouldn't use anymore wouldn't give you this information. And why does this matter? Why am I talking about metamers so much? Can I have the projector back, please? You clicked for me. Don't click. There we go. Thank you. So I'm talking about all of these metamers and spectral content versus chromaticity because it's very important. So not only do we have the energy coming out of our light source, right? Spectral power distribution, if you don't know, diagrams showing you, describing the energy coming out of your luminaire. So what it looks like is wavelengths across the bottom and radiant power going on the vertical axis. And it shows you the amount of radiant energy emitted by your source at each wavelength, so you know what's coming out where. Objects also have something similar, their own version. They have a spectral reflectance function, and that looks the same, but it is what percentage of the light energy at any particular wavelength gets reflected. So those things work together. So even if your chromaticity is the same, if your spectral content is different, it's going to interact with that reflectance differently. And math is math. The result is not going to be the same. So these things matter. And now I'll get off my soapbox and Mike can play some more tricks on your eyes.
So we talked about how color's relative. We've talked about we see things in relation to the world around us. But where do we see things? Well, our acute vision is actually very small. What I'm showing you here, there's 12 black dots on that image. But the chances are you can't see them all at the same time. Your eyes, you're scanning around, you see them, and then the ones you could see out the corner of your eye have now disappeared. So you look back at them and they reappear. They keep coming and going. You can never see all 12 at the same time unless you get far enough away.
Or far enough off to the side, in which case we told you so.
Yeah, we told you not to.
We tried to warn you.
But even from here where I am, I can't see all 12. And it's because they're not, though they're a pattern, there isn't a black dot on every intersection, so your brain can't make a model of this quickly enough to kind of remember where they are. And we can only see in a very small portion of our visual field, we can only see those dots because they're small, accurately in the very center of our vision. And where we can see accurately is about 2 degrees, and it's about the size of your thumbnail at arm's length. So that square of your thumbnail, that's where you can see detail. That's where you can read. That's where all your detailed vision goes on. All the rest of your visual field is blurry. You don't know that because your brain fills it in with the sharp image you just saw when you were looking over there. So your system relies on scanning with your eyes. They're continually moving. Your brain remembers the sharp bits and joins them all together, fills in the rest. Then this looks something like that. So if you were able to freeze the system, that's actually what your eyes see. You see a very small area of sharp, and the rest is blurry. And the same applies to color. So we're not seeing the detail in color. We're responsive to edges outside the center. We see the color. The color doesn't change, but we don't really know exactly where it is. Our resolution on color is fairly poor compared to our black and white, very poor compared to our black and white. But it's still there, so we're aware of the color around. We're not able to focus on it, but it still influences the color that we see in the middle, where we've got sharp vision, all this blurry color around that's providing our relative base that we decide what the color in the middle looks like. That's one more effect. There's more. We tend to think of colored light and white light as all being much the same. I can go with a meter to any of these and I can measure them. Now they're all going to give me sensible values, but that's not actually the case. And in every case, colored light appears brighter to us than white light of the same brightness. Here's an example of that. Each of these colored squares is actually the same brightness as the background behind it. And if I put it in Photoshop and say, make this into a black and white image, this is what I'd get. Because these are all actually the same brightness as far as a meter's concerned, or as far as a computer's concerned. But as far as your eye and your brain are concerned, the color looks brighter than the background. And some colors more so than others. Here's another example. So I'm going to ask you to pick one of these yellow squares, patches that you think is the same brightness as the red background. And similarly, pick in your brain one of these yellow squares that's the same brightness as the blue background. And you're probably going to pick one of these, I would guess, yeah? And you're probably going to pick one of those. In both cases, it's the center square. And like with the color thing before, even when you know, you can't change it. And this one, to me, still looks the same brightness as the background. And this is because deep reds and deep blues look much brighter to us than they really are, certainly compared to yellows. So this effect can be quite extreme. This shows you the relative brightness of colors, saturated colors, relative to white of the same brightness that colors actually appear. So a magenta can appear up to 2.5 times as bright as a white of the same color. That's a lot, isn't it? I mean, 2.5 times. Deep red's the same. Almost no effect in the greens and yellows. They don't appear much brighter than white. And blues up to twice, magenta up to 2.5 times. So when you have a blue gel, Wendy's R80 or whatever on stage, when you're trying to decide how bright that is compared to the white over the other side of the stage, if you went on stage with a meter, you would get completely the wrong answer. If you're trying to balance them from the audience's perspective, you'd end up making the blue twice as bright as you needed to. This is not how the camera that's filming this would see it. The camera's going to see it in a completely different way. The whole vision system of the camera will see it in a different way. But when it comes out the monitor, the other end, or the television screen, and the human eye is involved again, then this effect will come into play. So it's an interesting one. This is probably why Congo blue is of any use at all. I mean, we know Congo blue is what?
Less than 1%. Less than 1% transmission.
Less than 1% transmission.
Can I ask a quick question? How many of you have used Congo blue? Okay, good.
A small part of the audience.
Yeah.
Not a few. It's a very deep blue with some red in it that is very popular in lighting design and in theatre. But if you look at the swatch book, it should be a waste of time. Less than 1% of the light. I shouldn't be able to see it.
But it's awesome.
But it's awesome.
What it actually does.
Right.
It's awesome. And you can see a lot of things with that.
Right. And this is part of, the eye adjusts and all those other things as well, but this is part of that story as to why Congo blue is actually as effective as it is because it appears nearly over twice as bright as the meter says it is. This is an example for the video people. This is kind of a video test chart. It's got the rainbow of colors going left to right, and we have saturation going top to bottom. So we go from fully white at the top to fully black at the bottom and everything in between. Now we know, with our engineering heads on, we know that the brightest part of this image must be along the top because they're reds at full, greens at full, blues at full. That projector's doing the best it can along the top there, full white. But I'm willing to bet that you don't see that as the brightest part of this image. What you will see as the brightest part of this image is some area across the middle here where the colors are fully saturated. In fact, you may well even see an illusory white line across the middle. It isn't there, but your brain tells you it is. But we know that here, it's only the red emitter from this projector that's on. The blue is off, the green is off. That is nowhere near as bright as the white at the top, nowhere near. But we don't see it that way. So it's important to remember, if you're trying to worry about brightness and meters and things, only white light. Only white light. Let's see some of that.
So just in case you thought that this was just trickery of Photoshop, I'm going to show you this in real life. Again, on the camera. Sorry, kids, time for dessert. I'm going to run out of things for them to go do during these times, right? So Helmholtz-Kohlrausch is the name of this effect that we're talking about here. And here I have a red in comparison to a 32K white. And I would raise your hand if you think the white is equal. I would like to note for the record that no hands are raised. And if you think for some reason it's because I've tricked you by putting one on the left and one on the right, I'll switch it for you. And I think the answer is the same. And let's do it here with magenta, which...
And those were the same brightness is what you...
oh, yes, I did actually. Yes, they are. Yes, those meter the same, yep. So how about now? This was the one where the magenta would appear 2.5 times brighter. I feel like that, yeah, kind of does to me. I don't know if it does to you. You could look at it this way if you want. Maybe you don't like pink. Pink's not your thing. I've used too much pink this talk already. Okay. How about green? Cyan. How about that one? Same thing, right? What is going on? And also, how on earth are we supposed to do our work on paper with metrics that do not take this into account? The lumen is useless for colored light. It is useless for colored light. It's debatable for white light. I say quietly, because I'm starting that battle.
I haven't got the big soapbox here.
The little soapbox.
Forgot to bring that one.
But for colored light, so the lumen has problems, and those problems are increased. They are larger when we get into colored light. It's just not useful for colored light. We need something like a perceived brightness metric or a brightness to luminance ratio model. And scientists, very smart people that I talk to and complain about this, and we can have some lights back so that I can arm wave about this properly. Here it is on the other side in case. So I talk to them and I'm like, this is a problem. We have to do something about this because look at that. It's no good. How are we supposed to do our work? And they go, boof, that's hard. Because as I think you said earlier this afternoon, not only this morning, but all of these things that we have to quantify light and color, we have to figure these things out by asking actual humans subjective questions and then turn that somehow into a scientific model, a statistical model. And it is time-consuming and hard, to which I say, okay, well, then we better get started, right? But I'm not a scientist, so I can't actually be the one to do it. So I have to convince people. So I arm wave and I ask nicely and insistently and I show them light cues and hopefully one day we'll get something better. The lumen is useful if you're comparing a color to a color. So if I have two lights that are making the exact same magenta, I could use it to know which of those two magentas was a little bit brighter. So like if it's actually an apples to apples comparison, it's vaguely useful, although your eyes might also tell you that. But that's it. He's got some slides now to back me up on this lumens thing.
Well, just a little bit, what Wendy was saying, I was saying earlier that we can't measure color except through asking questions. If I want to know how you see color, I have to ask questions. I can't measure what you see. And so where did some of these things come from, like this magenta's 2.5 times brighter? It's done by asking a lot of people questions, So large studies showing them colored patches, which one looks brighter, and adjusting it, and then on a statistical average of the average human eye, you get these results. This is the kind of experiment that might be done. So here's red, green, blue, CMY, full saturates, and next to it is the gray patch that actually matches. If I took a meter, then that would match in brightness. But then if you ask people to make a red that matches the gray patch, you get a different answer with a lot less red in it than the original. And so you ask enough people and you come up with this kind of thing. But this is what you have to remember about color science. Everything has to be referred through statistics and asking people. There's no real fundamental measurement with color.
It sure does. The question was, how does distance affect all of this? Well, it does affect it. That's probably a whole other session.
It does affect it, and the surrounding,
the environment,
light, everything.
There's a reason, for example, it is all subjective, yes, and this all assumes that you have normal color vision. But wait, there's more. There's more, and then we'll get to questions. I see a question there that I will get to. But we have a couple more slides.
Just a couple more.
And a couple more one more example.
Yeah. This is not a new issue. LEDs have kind of brought it to the fore because we have these little narrow emitters and we have a lot more control about what the color is, but we've always had this issue. This, just for example, just shows you what a Roscoe 69 would have looked like under a long life or a short life lamp. But all the changes we've been familiar with in the past from incandescent lamps have always been along the black body line. They've always just been a changing color temperature. Now, going from a cool to a warm, they don't go in the direction magenta to green. And we are predisposed to be pretty insensitive to color change along the black body line. That's what the world does. The sun changes color temperature throughout the day. It's warm in the evening. If it's a cloudy day, it's really high. The color temperature is changing all the time, and we automatically adjust for that. We don't want the apple we're trying to see if it's ripe to look completely different under one kind of daylight than another, so our brain compensates for color temperature. So we're pretty insensitive to color temperature. So when we were using incandescent lamps and the changes were all in this direction, though the changes were significant, we didn't find them objectionable. But what we all know is that any change in this direction, you go the slightest bit green, and it was horrible. Complex fluorescence, HID lamps, we knew that when they went green, they looked awful. So we're really, really sensitive to changes in this direction, and that's what the wacky world of additive mixing has introduced us to, the possibility to do that and get it really wrong.
Or really right.
Or really right. Wendy.
So I have one more demo for you here. A lot of times the EOS team gets asked, they get complaints about the gel picker, but that's not what that color looks like. That's not what that color looks like, right? I know what it looks like. And I like to think that I know what it looks like. I'm the color specialist after all, right? So let's take R54 as an example. R54, that's the gel in the gel book, okay? But all of these color tiles are accurate interpretations of that color on a display. What's different? What's going on here? Because this is amber and purple. Well, I've changed the backlight color from 2700K at that end to 6500K at this end. What's the real world manifestation of that? I'm putting it on an EHG, or I'm putting it on an HMI as a dichroic, right? And going this way, what I've changed is my RGB space, the definition of my RGB space. I've got ProPhoto, sRGB, Apple, PAL, CCAM, just different ways to find that chromaticity mathematically. And they do not result in the same answer. So when you're saying, give me R54, just know that any one of these answers is a good one, and maybe you want to be a little more descriptive or understanding if the first answer isn't the one that you thought. I'm going to turn on these two lights over here, and I have the exact same yellow gel in front of a 5600K white and a 3500K white. And this you might be able to predict, right? So if I have a yellow dichroic in front of an HMI in my moving light and the exact same yellow dichroic in front of a halogen, this is what I would expect to see. Hopefully that's not surprising to you. If it is, this is the moment that I say, what's in your source matters. because the gel takes light away. It doesn't add anything that isn't there. And it takes it away as a percentage. It's going to take away 20% of the red, 50% of the green, whatever it is. It's a percentage of what it's given. So that's going to be different. But as Mike was saying, we're forgiving. You know, if I said to you that the color was noticeably different between a long life and a short life HPL, you're going to be like, really, Wendy? Come on, you're too picky. But then I would say, well, am I though? Because I can see that difference. Let me just let that toggle back and forth for you. It's subtle, but one of those to me looks a little greener than I would expect. And if I'm only using one of them, my eye will adjust. It will all look consistent. I won't remember that it's different at all. I'll accept that new reality. But if they're next to each other, it is actually different. So if you're asking somebody to match that yellow gel, which one do you want? And all of this last soapbox here, is my reminder, please, to always keep in mind that chromaticity, or color point, does not equal spectral content, and both pieces are really important. And I'll come up with a prize, although I don't have one, for whoever recognizes why first. What is appearing here? Hopefully somebody in reception has a prize I can give you. Nobody? Flying pig. Where did that come from? In the back. Find me after. I don't know what I'm going to give you, but something. Yes, this was Kate Foster and I having some fun with M&Ms and metamers. And on that note, I'm going to let Mike close us out.
Well, we've seen it all, you know, so what are we seeing there? We're seeing three colors. That's it. End of story. Thank you.
Bye. And, yeah, we got to give you time to hit the restroom and get your next one. Thank you.